The gun barrel pressed cold against Clarissa Donovan's temple. For the first time in her billionaire life, money meant nothing. Not the $3 billion empire she had built from her father's struggling company. Not the penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan. Not the designer suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. In that crowded cafe, surrounded by the morning symphony of espresso machines and clicking keyboards, none of it could save her. But it wasn't her bodyguards who moved. It was the exhausted man in the corner booth, coffee growing cold, worn jacket hanging loose on his frame, eyes that carried shadows no amount of sleep could erase. Marcus Thorne had sworn his fighting days were over, buried with his wife, buried with the classified missions that never existed, buried with the man they once called the Ghost of Blackwater. Yet as his fingers wrapped around the gunman's wrist, muscle memory older than his daughter's lifetime took over. His body remembered what his mind had tried so desperately to forget. 4 seconds. That's all it took. Left hand locked the gun's slide. Right hand struck the nerve cluster on the attacker's wrist. The weapon clattered to the floor, an elbow to the face, a controlled takedown. The threat neutralized. The entire cafe held its breath. Some heroes don't wear suits. They wear the invisible scars of wars nobody talks about. They sit in corner booths counting pennies, wondering how they'll pay rent. They love their daughters more than their own survival, and sometimes they can't help but be who they truly are. 30 minutes before the attack, Marcus had been doing what he did every Tuesday morning, sitting in the only cafe where coffee costs $2, staring at a notebook filled with numbers that refused to add up to hope. $42 in his checking account, $800 needed for rent, due in 4 days, $300 for utilities, 2 months overdue. November in Chicago didn't forgive poverty. The cold crept through thin walls and thinner jackets. It found its way into bones that had survived desert heat in Arctic operations, but couldn't survive the slow freeze of financial ruin. His calloused fingers traced the numbers again, as if touching them might somehow change their cruel arithmetic. But math didn't care about desperation. Math didn't care about the promises he'd made to his dying wife. His phone buzzed, a text from Rosie's school. His 9-year-old daughter had forgotten her lunch money again. Marcus closed his eyes. She hadn't forgotten. Rosie was smart beyond her years. Somewhere in that crumbling elementary school, his little girl was sitting hungry, stuffing paper towels into shoes with holes, telling herself that if she didn't eat, there would be more money for other things. 9 years old, and already she understood sacrifice. Mrs. Kowalski from apartment 3A would pick Rosie up from school today. The 70-year-old Polish widow had become their unofficial guardian angel since Serena's death 3 years ago. She watched Rosie after school in exchange for Marcus fixing things around her apartment. It was one of the few arrangements in his life that felt balanced. But last week, she had mentioned something about her son in Florida, wanting her to move closer. Another support beam threatening to crumble beneath his already shaky foundation. Martha, the waitress who had been working these morning shifts for decades, appeared at his table. Her face carried the kind of kindness that came from knowing struggle intimately. She refilled his coffee without asking, left the check face down with "on the house" scrawled across it in blue ink. Small mercies, the only kind poverty allowed. 3 booths away, Clarissa Donovan was fighting her own war. From the outside, she looked untouchable. Charcoal Chanel suit that cost more than most cars. Diamond earrings catching the light with every sharp turn of her head. An aura of authority that made the air around her seem to bend and bow. She was on the phone, voice cutting through the cafe's ambiance like a blade through silk. "I don't care what time zone they're in. Wake them up. The Hong Kong contracts need to be signed today." But beneath the table, hidden from the world she commanded, her left hand trembled. The divorce papers had been finalized yesterday. 23 years of marriage, reduced to asset division and custody arrangements. 23 years of building something she thought was real, revealed as nothing more than a long con. Garrett had never loved her. He had loved her company, her money, her father's legacy, and now he wanted half of everything. The hostile takeover attempt from Sentinel Corporation had blindsided her board. 3 of her executives had received death threats in the past month. 2 had been in accidents that seemed too targeted to be random. Her phone buzzed with another message from her lawyers. Garrett was now demanding 60% of the company assets and full custody of Natasha, their 16-year-old daughter. The gunman moved at 8:47 a.m. Water dripped from his black raincoat as he approached the counter. Martha was asking what he'd like, her perpetual smile firmly in place. He didn't answer. Instead, his hand emerged from his pocket, and with it came the dull gleam of a Glock 19. "Everyone on the ground! Now!" The words exploded through the cafe like shrapnel. A woman screamed. A laptop clattered to the floor. Coffee mugs shattered, spreading brown liquid across white tile. Marcus's body was already moving before his mind caught up. His hand slipped into his jacket pocket, touching the photograph he always carried. Rosy school picture, pink backpack, gap-toothed smile, his talisman, his reason. Then his eyes began their work. 17 civilians, 3 possible exits. 1 hostile with a semi-automatic weapon, shooter stance, weight too far forward, grip too tight, amateur, desperate, dangerous. But this wasn't a random robbery. The gun was military issue. The timing was too precise. The target selection too specific. Someone had sent this man. Someone wanted Clarissa Donovan scared or dead. "You, the rich one, stand up." Clarissa's hands shook as she reached for her designer bag. Fear had stripped away everything she had built. CEO, billionaire, power broker. None of it mattered when death was inches away. Marcus watched the gunman's trigger finger, twitching. In about 3 seconds, that finger was going to squeeze. The math was brutal. Distance, 12 feet. Probability of successful intervention, maybe 40%. Probability of Rosie growing up without a father, 60%. But then another image flashed through his mind. Rosie at 18, reading about how her father sat frozen while a woman died. Marcus moved. Not the way civilians move. This was something else entirely. Something drilled into muscle and bone in places whose names would never appear on any map. The attacker caught the movement in his peripheral vision, started to turn. Too late. 4 seconds of violence that changed everything. The young man beneath him was crying now. "I'm sorry, my mom, the medical bills, I didn't want to." Another soul crushed by the mathematics of desperation. Police flooded through the doors. Marcus raised his hand slowly, stepped back, faded into the crowd of witnesses, just another bystander who got lucky. After an hour of questions, Marcus was almost to his old Toyota when he heard heels clicking on wet pavement behind him. "Mr. Thorne." He turned to find Clarissa Donovan standing in the rain. Her $1,000 suit was growing dark with water. Her carefully constructed facade was showing cracks. That wasn't luck. It wasn't a question. Marcus's expression didn't change. Adrenaline makes people do unexpected things. "No." She stepped closer. "That was training. Military. Special operations." Silence stretched between them. "Does it matter?" he finally asked. "You saved my life." "Anyone would have. 20 people in that cafe, and you were the only one who moved. Why?" Marcus looked past her toward the city skyline. "Because I have someone to go home to." Clarissa reached into her bag and pulled out a business card. "Please, let me at least help." "I don't need charity." "It's not charity, it's gratitude." She paused. "You have a daughter." Something in Marcus shifted, protective instincts flaring. "How did you—" "You touched something in your pocket before you moved. I saw the edge of a photo. Pink backpack, big smile. Despite himself, Marcus felt his mouth twitch towards something that might have been a smile in another life. Rosie, she's 9. I have a daughter too, Natasha, 16. Something painful crossed Clarissa's expression. She lives with her father now. That night after Rosie was asleep, Marcus stood in her doorway, watching her breathe. The apartment was cold. He'd turned the heat down to save money, but she was bundled under 3 blankets, only her dark hair visible against the pillow. On her nightstand sat a photograph of Serena, taken 2 months before the diagnosis. She was laughing at something off camera. His phone buzzed. A voicemail from Clarissa. Mr. Thorne, I need someone who can see threats before they materialize. Someone who can't be bought. The salary would solve your financial problems. Health insurance, education fund for your daughter. Please consider it. Later, standing at the window of his dark living room, Marcus made a decision, not for himself, for the little girl sleeping in the next room. He texted Clarissa back. 1 meeting. Tomorrow. Noon. The Donovan Industries building rose 47 floors into Chicago's morning sky, all black glass and steel ambition. Marcus stood in the lobby wearing his only suit, purchased 3 years ago for Serena's funeral, not worn since. Clarissa's office occupied the northeast corner, glass walls overlooking the skyline, the kind of carpet that swallowed footsteps. She turned when he entered. Relief crossed her face. Mr. Thorne, thank you for coming. On her desk, a tablet displayed patterns of corporate sabotage, coordinated attacks on multiple fronts. Sentinel Corporation, she explained. They lost a $2 billion defense contract to us 6 months ago. Since then, 3 of my executives have been threatened. 2 have had accidents. Your ex-husband, how bitter is the divorce? Pain flickered across Clarissa's face. On a scale of 1 to 10, 15. Would he work with Sentinel? Garrett would work with the devil himself if it meant hurting me. She pulled up another screen. There's a bounty on my head, Mr. Thorne. $30 million. The number hung in the air between them. I need someone who understands that violence in boardrooms can be just as deadly as violence in war zones. Someone who can't be bought. Everyone can be bought. Not you, because you have her. Your daughter. That makes you incorruptible. She slid a folder across the desk, an offer that made Marcus's breath catch. More money than he'd made in 3 years combined. Rosie comes first, always. If you can't accept that, this conversation is over. I wouldn't have it any other way. An hour later, Clarissa's BMW pulled up outside McKinley Elementary, paint peeling from walls, playground equipment more rust than metal. This is where Rosie goes to school? Clarissa couldn't hide her shock. Academic scholarship. They have a good gifted program. Children flooded through the doors. Marcus spotted Rosie immediately, smaller than her classmates, walking alone, a book clutched to her chest like armor. When she saw him, her face lit up like sunrise. Daddy, you're early. She ran to him, then stopped short when she noticed Clarissa. Who's this? This is Ms. Donovan. She's my new boss. Rosie's eyes widened, dark and intelligent, carrying wisdom far beyond her 9 years. You got a job? The hope in her voice nearly broke Marcus's heart. Clarissa knelt down to Rosie's level. Designer suit be damned. Your father's going to help keep my company safe. Rosie studied her with unfiltered intensity, taking in the expensive clothes, the careful makeup, the exhaustion that makeup couldn't quite hide. You look like a queen from a fairy tale. But queens in stories are always sad because they're alone in big castles. Are you sad? Clarissa's breath caught. In 34 years, no one had ever seen through her so completely. Sometimes, she admitted, yes. Rosie nodded solemnly. Then her face brightened. Do you want to come eat pasta with us? Daddy's not a very good cook, but I'll give you the portion with the most cheese. They ended up in Marcus's apartment, 3 rooms that wouldn't have fit inside Clarissa's closet, but there was warmth here. Life. Clarissa sat on the floor, helping Rosie with math problems. The girl's concentration was fierce, tongue poking out as she worked through fractions. "You're really good at math," Rosie observed. "Do all queens know math?" "I run a company. Math is the easy part." "What's the hard part?" "Trusting people." Rosie nodded like this made perfect sense. "Daddy has trouble with that too, since Mommy went to heaven, but I tell him that closing your heart just makes it cold, and cold hearts can't feel love." A crack appeared in Marcus's careful composure as he watched from the kitchen doorway. They ate at a table barely big enough for 3, cheap pasta and cheaper sauce, but Rosie talked enough for 10 people, filling the silence with stories about school and books and butterflies. Clarissa couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten a meal that felt like family. The next 3 days passed in a blur of security assessments. Marcus moved through Clarissa's world like a shadow, cataloging vulnerabilities. He vetted her staff, her drivers, her household employees. Everyone seemed clean, too clean. On the 3rd day, he found it. James Whitmore, Clarissa's executive assistant, 5 years of loyal service, impeccable record, and encrypted communications with a server traced back to Sentinel Corporation. That night his phone buzzed. Tobias Hawk Mercer, former Delta Force, former brother-in-arms. "Danny boy, heard you're back in the game." "I'm private security now. Legal." Hawk's laugh crackled through the line. "The bounty went up. 50 million now, and they hired the architect." Marcus went cold. The architect, a professional's professional, the kind of killer who made problems disappear completely. "How long do I have?" "He's already in Chicago, maybe 48 hours. I need backup." "The old team is standing by. 6 operators, full tactical. But Marcus, you come back to us for this, you're back in." Marcus looked through the glass wall at Clarissa, working by lamplight, fighting a war she didn't fully understand. "Just get me through this." The 4th day began with a phone call that changed everything. Natasha, Clarissa's 16-year-old daughter, voice shaking with fear. "Mom, there are men at Dad's house. They're asking about you. Dad's not here and I'm alone." Marcus was already moving. The drive to Winnetka took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of Clarissa clutching her phone, breathing in short, sharp gasps. The Garrett Donovan estate rose from manicured grounds. 12,000 square feet of old money. The front door was ajar. Marcus moved through the entrance with silent efficiency. Voices from the 2nd floor. "Your mother has something that belongs to my employers. Documents. Evidence." "I don't know anything. Please." Marcus took the stairs 3 at a time. Natasha backed against the wall, a man in a suit standing over her. The knife left Marcus's belt and found the man's shoulder before the attacker could turn. Not a kill strike, a disabling one. "Are you hurt?" Natasha shook her head, tears streaming. Then Clarissa was there, pulling her daughter into her arms. "Mom, I was so scared." "You're safe now." A car pulled into the driveway. Garrett Donovan. The man who arrived looked nothing like the polished executive in photographs. His eyes were wild, his confidence replaced by desperation. "Who the hell are you?" "Mr. Donovan, we need to talk about Sentinel Corporation." The mask slipped, just for a moment, but enough. Clarissa stepped forward. "Garrett, tell me you didn't put our daughter in danger." "You don't understand. The deals I made, the money I owe them, they said no one would get hurt. They put a gun to my head. They terrorized our child." Garrett's facade crumbled. "I didn't have a choice. They know things about me. They said if I helped them get control of your company, the debt would be cleared." He never finished, because that's when the other cars arrived. 4 black SUVs, no license plates, moving in tactical formation. Get the girls to the back of the house, Marcus commanded. Now! 12 men entered. Professionals, armed, coordinated. They expected a scared CEO and her family. They got the ghost of Blackwater. Marcus moved through them like smoke through shadows, using the house's layout against the invaders, creating choke points, eliminating threats. When it was finished, 8 men were unconscious. 3 were wounded. 1 had fled. Clarissa emerged from the safe room. We need to move. This location is compromised. Where do we go? There's a church, St. Michael's. My wife is buried there. Father Miguel is an old friend. It's the last place anyone would think to look. A church? Trust me, it wasn't a question anymore. St. Michael's Catholic Church stood like a stone prayer in a neighborhood that had forgotten God. The building was old, solid. Its walls had weathered 100 years of storms. Father Miguel was waiting at the side entrance, an old man whose eyes had seen suffering and chosen compassion. Marcus, it's been too long. Father, thank you for this. Inside, the church smelled of candles and old wood. Rosie had fallen asleep in the car. Marcus carried her to a pew cushioned with donated blankets. Mrs. Kowalski, who had insisted on coming, was already fussing over Natasha. In my day, the old woman muttered, we knew how to handle men like this. My husband kept a baseball bat by the door. Clarissa stood in the center of the nave, looking up at the stained glass windows. Serena loved this church, Marcus said, coming to stand beside her. She said it felt like the one place where the world couldn't touch us. You must miss her. Every day. But missing someone doesn't mean you stop living. It means you carry them with you. Garrett never made me better. Her laugh was bitter. I built a $3 billion company, and I couldn't even tell my own husband was lying to me. Building that company while raising a daughter and navigating a world that wanted you to fail? That's not nothing. That's everything. Clarissa's face softened almost imperceptibly. Why are you doing this? You could have walked away. Because my wife told me something before she died. She said, promise me you won't close your heart. Promise me that when you find people worth protecting, you'll protect them. His phone buzzed. Hawk, they're coming. 15 men. The architect is leading them. 20 minutes. The transformation happened instantly. The man Clarissa had been talking to disappeared, replaced by something harder. The ghost awakening. Hawk arrived with his team 10 minutes later. 6 men who moved like Marcus moved. Just like old times, Danny. Not like old times. This time I have something to lose. They transformed the church into a fortress. Defensive positions, kill zones, fields of fire. Father Miguel watched from the altar. You're bringing violence to God's house, Marcus. I'm bringing protection, Father. Sometimes a sword has to defend the innocent. Marcus found Rosie awake, sitting in a pew near the back. Hey, Butterfly, you should be sleeping. I couldn't. She looked up at him with the steady gaze of a child who had learned to be brave. Bad people are coming, aren't they? Yes. And you're going to stop them. I'm going to try. Rosie reached out and took his hand. Mommy used to tell me a story about a phoenix, a bird made of fire that could never really die. Because every time something bad happened, it would rise from the ashes stronger. Marcus felt his throat tighten. She said that's what you were, her phoenix. And she said that one day, when she wasn't here anymore, I should remember that no matter how dark things got, you would always rise again. Rosie squeezed his hand. So don't forget, okay? Whatever happens tonight. Marcus pulled his daughter into his arms. I love you, Butterfly. I love you too, Daddy. Now go be a phoenix. The attack came at 10:47 p.m. 15 men, professional, disciplined. At their head, the architect. Phoenix! The name crackled through a megaphone. Send out Clarissa Donovan and the laptop. Everyone else walks away. Marcus keyed his radio. Counteroffer, walk away now, and I won't demonstrate why they called me the ghost of Blackwater. The 2 minutes passed in heartbeats. Then the attack began. Smoke grenades first, but Hawk's team had trained for worse. Contact north entrance. 3 more west side. Hold fire. Let them commit. The church erupted, not chaos. Orchestrated violence. Contained. Precise. Marcus stayed central, coordinating, until he saw movement toward the basement stairs, toward the girls. He intercepted 2 attackers. The first went down fast. The second was better. They traded strikes in the church aisle. The attacker pulled a knife. Marcus caught the wrist, redirected the blade, finished with a chokehold. Then he heard Rosie's voice from the basement. Terror, pure and sharp. "Daddy!" Marcus ran. The architect stood behind Rosie, gun pressed to her temple. Clarissa and Natasha were backed against the wall. Mrs. Kowalski lay on the floor, a bruise forming on her temple. "Ah, Mr. Thorne." The architect's voice was cultured, pleasant. "Now we can discuss terms. Let her go. First, Ms. Donovan deletes all evidence, every file, every backup." Clarissa looked at Marcus, then at Rosie. "Do it," Marcus said. "Marcus, do it, please." Clarissa's hands shook as she opened her laptop, but Marcus was watching Rosie. His daughter wasn't crying. She was looking at him with eyes that carried wisdom far beyond her 9 years. Remembering something, the story about the phoenix, about trust, about falling. Rosie went completely limp, every muscle released at once. She dropped like a doll, sliding through the architect's grip. He adjusted, his gun tracking downward for a split second. A split second was all Marcus needed. The knife left his hand. 3 meters. A throw that should have been impossible. It found the architect's shoulder. Marcus crossed the distance in 2 strides. 10 seconds of violence, then it was over. "Rosie, are you hurt?" I remembered Mommy's story. Tears were streaming down her face. About trust, about falling. "Was that right, Daddy?" "You did perfect, Butterfly. You did perfect." The aftermath took hours. Police, FBI, media. The architect and his surviving men were taken into custody. Garrett Donovan was arrested on 18 different charges. 3 days later, the justice they had fought for finally arrived. The evidence Clarissa had spent months gathering was released simultaneously to 47 media outlets, 16 law enforcement agencies, and 12 congressional oversight committees. Too big to suppress. By morning, Sentinel Corporation stock had crashed 80%. FBI agents raided their headquarters in 3 states. Garrett Donovan was arrested on live television. Cameras captured the moment handcuffs clicked around his wrists. "You'll regret this," he snarled at Clarissa through the crowd of reporters. She stood tall, unafraid. Marcus beside her, Rosie holding her hand. "The only thing I regret," Clarissa said clearly, "is the 23 years I wasted believing you were capable of love." The cameras caught everything. The defeated villain, the triumphant survivor, the little girl who watched justice being served. 2 weeks after Garrett's arrest, they stood in the St. Michael's Church once more. Not hiding this time, not fighting, just beginning. The wedding was small, private, exactly what they wanted. Father Miguel officiated, his weathered hands steady as he blessed their union. Hawk stood as best man, looking uncomfortable in a suit but refusing to be anywhere else. Rosie served as flower girl, scattering wildflowers she had picked herself from the church garden. She took her job seriously, tongue poking out in concentration. Natasha was maid of honor. The 16-year-old who had barely spoken to her mother 6 months ago now stood beside her, tears streaming down her face. Mrs. Kowalski sat in the front pew, dabbing her eyes and telling anyone who would listen that she had known from the moment she saw them together. "I'm not good at this," Marcus said. his voice rough as he held Clarissa's hands. Speeches, feelings, words. Then don't use words, Clarissa whispered. So he kissed her instead, and Rosie cheered, and Natasha laughed, and somewhere Marcus could almost feel Serena smiling. The reception was pizza and cake in the church basement, the same basement where they had almost died. Daddy, Rosie said, tugging his sleeve, is she my mom now? Marcus looked at Clarissa, saw the hope in her eyes. That's up to her, and up to you. Rosie turned to Clarissa. I think I'd like to try it, having a mom again, if that's okay with you. Clarissa knelt down, tears spilling freely. That's more than okay, sweetheart. That's everything. 6 months later, the Cafe Meridian looked exactly the same as it had that rainy Tuesday morning. Same espresso machines, same clicking keyboards, same corner booth by the window. But everything else had changed. Marcus sat in that booth now with Clarissa beside him. Rosie and Natasha were at the counter, trying to convince Martha to let them help make cappuccinos. Natasha had changed in the past 6 months. The angry, withdrawn teenager who blamed her mother for the divorce had transformed into something softer. She had moved in with them 2 months ago, choosing Clarissa and Marcus over Garrett's empty mansion. She's not going to let me help, Natasha called over. She says my foam technique is aggressive. Your foam technique is aggressive, Rosie shot back. You attack the milk. I do not attack the milk. You murdered 3 lattes yesterday. Marcus watched them bicker with warmth spreading through his chest. Sisters, not by blood, but by choice. Clarissa was laughing at something Rosie had said. Really laughing. The sound filled the cafe like music. Her hand found his under the table. Simple silver band on her finger. A ring Marcus had made himself. You're thinking too loud again, Clarissa murmured. Just remembering. Good memories or bad ones? Is there a difference anymore? She squeezed his hand, understanding without needing explanation. Rosie appeared at their table, foam mustache on her lip. Daddy, Martha says I can come back next Saturday and she'll teach me latte art. Is that so? She says I have steady hands. Very important for latte art. Very important for lots of things. Rosie looked at him, then at Clarissa, then back at him. Daddy? Yes, butterfly? Remember when you used to come here by yourself? And you'd sit in this booth and look sad? Marcus felt his throat tighten. I remember. You don't do that anymore. No, I don't. Rosie smiled, the same gap-toothed smile from the photograph he still carried. Good, because you were looking for something. I could always tell. And now you found it. She skipped back to the counter. After a moment, Clarissa spoke. Did you? Find what you were looking for? Marcus watched his daughter charming Martha. Watched Natasha rolling her eyes but smiling. Watched Mrs. Kowalski at a nearby table, telling stories to anyone who would listen. His family, built from brokenness, forged in fire. Yeah, he said, I found it. Outside the window, Chicago moved through its endless rhythms. The city that had almost destroyed him, now feeling like home. Clarissa leaned her head against his shoulder. What now? Now we drink coffee, help Rosie with her homework, fight with Natasha about curfew, listen to Mrs. Kowalski's stories for the 100th time. He kissed the top of her head. Now we live. It wasn't the ending Marcus had imagined for himself. The ghost of Blackwater, drinking lattes in a corner cafe, worrying about school projects and teenage drama. But it was better than any ending he could have planned, because it wasn't really an ending at all. It was a beginning. The thunder outside had quieted. The rain had stopped. And through the cafe window, sunlight was breaking through the clouds. A phoenix rising, again and again and again. Because that's what phoenixes do. That's what fathers do. That's what love does. It rises.